Hi, I'm Ted Nelson with another tranche of Computers for Cynics. Today's revelation is Hyperhistory. In this one, I figure personally. Sorry about that. Many people think the World Wide Web was my idea. I want to clear that up. The web is a dumbed-down of my idea, but I believe I created the web accidentally by two mistakes I made. We'll be getting to that. Where to begin a history? Depends on what you want to emphasize. I'd begin the story of Hypertext with the Rosetta Stone, about 196 BC, the Talmud after 70 AD, the Hexapla of Origin, 3rd century. These are all parallel documents, side by side, connected. The kind of document not possible yet in today's electronic formats, nearly 2,000 years later. Jump to around year 1450, Gutenberg reinvents movable type and prints Bibles, great impact on religion. Shortly thereafter, an enterprising Venetian named Aldus Manutius invents the personal book, which moves the Renaissance from palaces to middle-class homes. Jump 500 years to 1945. Vannevar Bush, his name is pronounced Vannevar Bush, President Roosevelt's science advisor, writes an article predicting a machine he calls the Memex, storing all the world's writings on microfilm on a desk. He misunderestimated, a word from another Bush. He misunderestimated how many writings there would be, as did everyone. Vannevar Bush proposed that scholars would make trails through the world's knowledge, a new form of publication, each author connecting things and adding content of his own. Technical aside, Bush's article also proposed transclusion. 1951, West Coast, Doug's Epiphany. Douglas Engelbart is one of the greatest men of all time, a warm-hearted, soft-spoken, and saintly guy who invented much of our modern world. Doug's name, Engelbart, means angel's beard. Didn't know angels had beards, did you? Well, Doug read Bush's article in 1945 when he was stationed overseas. Then when he got his PhD in California in 1951, Doug Engelbart had a great vision. That interactive computer displays would make possible a new form of collaboration vital for the urgent, complex problems of humanity. And it would be rather like the Memex. It was all about connections between documents, but also connections between people and the dynamics of collaboration. Step by step, Doug went through the painful departmental politics and funding to build a team that would change the world. That was his intention, and that is what he did, though nowhere near what he hoped to do. Cut to the East Coast. In 1960, I, Ted Nelson, took a computer course, and it hit me. The interactive computer screen will be the new home of humanity, the next great media revolution, and I want to be in on it. A lot of people can't understand how I could figure this out without being an engineer, but that's the reason I could figure it out. The engineers didn't have a clue. It took a media person. I'd been an actor on stage and TV. I'd published a little magazine. I'd produced an LP. I'd shot a half-hour movie. I'd seen TV developing from the inside, watching what went on in my father's control rooms at NBC and CBS, starting when I was 10. So the technicalities and art of interaction would be the next frontier. I didn't actually see an interactive screen for 5 years, but I didn't need to. I was a movie maker. I could feel the interactive computer screen. In my mind and heart, I saw it and touched it. I conjured it and caressed it, and it responded wonderfully. Many people still don't recognize interactive software as an art form. Many techies treat the interactive screen as a kind of blackboard, but artists know it as a lover. Here was my new credo. There would be millions of readers and writers all over the world with their own computers and screens, and they would be able to publish to each other without publishing companies in the middle. This meant new forms of writing. It meant a whole new form of literature. It would replace paper. 5 years later, when I started publishing on the subject, I called it Hypertext. I had not yet heard of Engelbart. Okay, technical part. Here was my initial technical design. Whatever the user typed in would be immediately saved for safety, on tape, I thought at the time. Each new version would consist of pointers to what was already there on the tape and what you were adding as you continued to write. The method would be safe and efficient and have other benefits which I gradually figured out. How to do the links was a separate problem. That would take 19 long years to figure out, but I feared that if I didn't design the documents of the future, the techies would screw it up, which I believe is exactly what has happened. What I really wanted was to make movies, but I thought it was more important to be the new Gutenberg. Little did I know that Gutenberg went bankrupt. 1964-ish. Meanwhile, in California, step by step, Doug Engelbart builds his lab. He gets sponsorship from Bob Taylor at the Defense Department and assembles a team at Stanford Research Institute, not Stanford U. In this project, Doug proceeds to invent multiple windows on a screen, screen sharing between collaborators, text editing on screens, the first word processing, links between texts, and much more. Technical point. Doug's links weren't embedded. The whole of Doug's vision was greater than these parts. The augmentation of human intellect, especially through collaborative networks of people, constantly improving their networks, their methods of collaboration. Those innumerable parts that I just enumerated of Doug's system were just the hockey sticks for a much greater game of collaboration he hoped to create. Okay, 1965, East Coast. After 4 years of study and design, I submit papers to 4 conferences and every one is accepted. The biggie is the ACM National Conference in, of all places, Pittsburgh. I think that most of the computer scientists in the world were in that room. It was possible in those days. And most of them heard my paper. It was very well received. And I could see that all my work was justified. The only question confronting me was how to get leverage, convincing somebody that I was right so I could get machines and a team together. But how could I make people believe I knew what I knew, let alone what I could do about it? Then somebody came along that appeared to believe me and had the bucks to make it all happen. A few days after my Pittsburgh talk, I got a call from a guy identifying himself as Director of Information Processing Research for the Central Intelligence Agency. He came to my house and asked how I'd like to be funded. People ask me, why would I take money from the CIA? Hey, our country needs good intelligence. And I needed the money to do good things. So I began writing proposals for the CIA, which went on for 5 years till I gradually realized they were just stringing me along, as most prospective backers do. 1966. Meanwhile, in California, Douglas Engelbart invents what everybody credits him for. The mouse. Oops, just dropped mine. In the excitement of trying to escape. Doug Engelbart invents the mouse, which is a big improvement over the light pen. But somehow the process of myth-making has dropped the more important stuff from his reputation one-liner, leaving only inventor of the mouse. Doug's overall vision was and is so much more than that. East Coast, 1967, the Hess Project, HES. I'm asked to join a project at Brown University that will be a chance to, quote, try out my hypertext ideas, unquote, at no salary. It ends up costing me all my savings. On the first day, I did not get along with the nasty guy who ran the project, but I am not a quitter. I should have quit. As I wrote in New Scientist magazine in 2006, I believe that humanity went down the wrong road with that project, dumbing down interactive documents to one-way jumps among paper simulations, a great and fundamental loss to civilization. The project was called Hess Hypertext Editing System, and it turned out the guy didn't really want hypertext. What he wanted was a system to prepare paper documents for printing, what we now call word processing. I consider this unworthy and entirely the wrong path. You have to choose which it'll be. Are you going to have real electronic documents, or are they going to simulate paper? That project chose appearance over connection, dumbed down hypertext to one-way jumps and among paper simulations, and this would later become, alas, the structure of the World Wide Web. 1968, West Coast, by which time there were still no personal computers. Doug Engelbart's great demo at the Fall Joint Computer Conference, where he shows cooperative work by people at separate screens, the mouse, hypertext links, collaboration over the phone while people are pointing at the same text on different screens, and much more. At this point, computer screens were still considered exotic and crazy by most of the computer world. Alas, this was Doug's high point, because politics and disagreement took over and his lab gradually fell apart. Big skip to 1974, again on the West Coast. Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, Xerox PARC, starts hiring people away from Doug Engelbart, and his lab collapses. I was at dinner with Doug a couple of years ago when he actually wept at the memory of how his people had deserted him and how Bob Taylor, his earlier supporter, betrayed him and the vision he had betrayed him and the vision he had carried forward so faithfully. Alas, Doug Engelbart's system never got to the public. A company called Timeshare tried to productize it, but with no real interest in Doug's greater teaching. What if they put NLS out to a broad public? What if they productized Doug's software for distribution? We'll never know. Now the page turns. 1975, personal computing begins with kit computers, soon also modem kits. 1977 fully assembled personal computers at last, notably the Apple II. Now that some people have personal computers and slow over-the-phone modems, soon there are file-sharing methods, bulletin boards, message boards, forums, discussions, posting. The yearning for online publishing by individuals is at last fully revealed, though most people and big American companies still don't get it, and it's still a small subculture. East Coast, 1979, the big year for my Xanadu project. 6 of us come together, Roger, Mark, Stewart, Roland, Eric, and me, to design our worldwide hypertext network. Note that as of that moment, 1979, there are still very few personal computers in the world, and the only interactive screens most people have seen are airline ticket counters. But we knew what was coming. My team figures out how to do the links brilliantly, making links and reuse work together. This is described in my book, Literary Machines. What it would do: deep hypertext, that is, connected systems of documents with any connectivity and complexity, every quotation connected to its origin by my method from 1960, detailed side-by-side intercomparison between any 2 documents of versions showing which parts are the same and other connections as well. Links in profusion, not embedded but overlaid, a system of publication involving unrestricted reuse of content, but sale of the content could be required by the publisher separate from the document container. Our plan is to put stabilized content on servers with every character retaining its permanent address, stabilized XANU links on servers individually published, nothing at all like web links. Finally, Roger, Mark, and Stewart work out a brilliant unifying addressing scheme with a new kind of mathematics for compactly referring to content and structures throughout this universe and creating new documents and versions as permutations in this space. The boys start programming and Roger looks for backers. He and I agree that he can do the technical development, I'll plan the publishing business, but we're all agreed on certain ideals that would later become popular. Freedom of publication for everyone everywhere. Dodging government controls over free publication. Privacy for everyone that wants it. We see this as a new sweeping mechanism for democracy, citizen awareness, truth-telling, honoring minority views, and the documentation of the world. 8 more long years to the West Coast, 1988. Autodesk backs Xanadu in 1988. 9 years after, 8 or 9 years after what I just told you, my colleague Roger Gregory gets backing for his development company from Autodesk Inc. and its visionary founder, John Walker. Roger and I had agreed that he would develop the Xanadu system and I would work on interfaces and plan the publishing network. Unfortunately, that puts us in different departments at Autodesk, a recipe for danger. In business, your enemy or your suspected saboteur is often the other department. You may know the story of the appointment in Samara, where a man brings on his doom by trying to avoid it. That happened to me. I got a call from one of the Xanadu programs saying Roger was out of control and throwing things, and they were going to quit. So while I had no official status in Roger's development company, I called John Walker, the head of Autodesk, and told him the situation, and Roger was relieved of command. Turned out that Roger was right. He was throwing things because the team wanted to redesign, which would obviously delay the project 6 months or more. With Roger no longer in charge, it was much worse than that. The program was redesigned for 4 years till Autodesk shut the project down, at which time a very different animal slouched into our ecological niche. So what were the two mistakes I made that brought about the World Wide Web? Mistake 1, participating in and endorsing the 1967 Hess Project. At Brown popularized hypertext links as one-way jumps between simulations of paper. I thought it would be fixed later, famous last words. Mistake 2, urging John Walker in 1988 to demote Roger Gregory from his own Xanadu development company, unwittingly giving up Xanadu's pole position as the world's hypertext system. What if Roger had not been demoted? I believe he would have kept his promise to John Walker and delivered the server network and a workable client within the 1 year he promised, definitely 2. Way ahead of HTML and the Mosaic browser that made it possible. Unseating Roger lost us the world, and no one knows what the world lost. I believe that without these 2 mistakes, humanity would have a far better text system. This is a very heavy burden, but I fight on. To be continued. Thank you.